Going to go over some almanac data so far from the month of January first and foremost, but then we're going to break down your weekend forecast in full detail, everything that you need to know for what looks to be a pretty messy Saturday that is going to be on tap. And then we'll talk about what's in the near future as we go into the second full week of January and transition into the beginning of next week. So in terms of rainfall, we got a little bit of rain as of last weekend, January 2nd and 3rd, and our totals only just above a half inch of rain, 0.61 inches to be exact. So we are still well below where we need to be on pace to hit that average mark of around 4 inches of rain for January all time, and a record exists back 101 years ago, 13 inches of rain, 13.22 inches of rain. Guess I should probably stand out of the way for you to read that number when talking about it. But over the last couple of days for the month of January, haven't had much in the way of rain. We might have gotten a couple minuscule drizzles or sprinkles, maybe even just more of a mist shower courtesy of some of that surface level cloud cover that has been forming. But it has resulted in a steady decline from the near normal category, which we were actually fairly close to the a bit wet category as of the 3rd of the month. But throughout the work week, no rain recorded, at least at Middle Georgia Regional Airport, and that now puts us in the dry category for the month of January. So a little bit behind the pace that we need to be at in order to hit our average mark of 4 inches of rain. But with not too much in the way of rain, believe it or not, last weekend's rain chances or rainfall that we did record did help us out just a little bit, but we haven't seen much change on this drought monitor as of the last couple of weeks. And the good news is we haven't seen any worsening of the conditions, but the bad news is we haven't seen any improvement with these conditions. And they typically can take maybe about a week or two for the drought monitor to get on board with some of the rainfall totals that we've seen and see maybe some alleviation of the dry conditions in real time. So right now where we all stand is a moderate drought for the most part, which is the kind of getting into the first drought category. Abnormally dry conditions just means it's been a while without rain. Some rain, maybe just a little bit of a shower, might be a bit beneficial for some of the dry ground that continues to settle in. But over to the west, we still have these patchy areas of a severe drought in areas like Taylor County, Macon County, over to Peach and Crawford counties, and some portions of Houston County and Upson counties. But this drought monitor does not look near as bad as it did, say, a couple weeks ago when a severe drought was very widespread. And we did even have some areas of an extreme drought, the dark red color, which you don't see on this scene camera view, but it was creeping up to areas like Chris County as of a couple of weeks ago. So some of the rain during the month of December did actually bring some improvement to the drought monitor, but we're still looking for some widespread rainmakers to completely take us out of those dry conditions. And the month of January, no secret, it has been off to a warm start, especially over the last couple of days. Throughout the midweek, we hit a stretch of some spring-like temperatures, if you ask me. 72, 77, and 75 for a high temperature both Tuesday, Wednesday, and all the way into Thursday. And you see this asterisk by 77 on Wednesday. And I put that there because we, in fact, broke a record high temperature. The record on Wednesday stood at 76 degrees. We went 1 degree above that at 77 degrees. But each of the first 8 days of the month of January have been above average with your high temperatures, kind of continuing the warm stretch that we had at the back half of December. Of course, we had a big time cool down right before New Year's, getting into December 30th, December 29th. However, after that, it was a steady warming trend. We were just above average for the first weekend of the new year. And then as we went throughout the rest of this work week, it has just been well above average, not even close to the average number of 59 degrees this time of year. And I do anticipate Friday and Saturday are going to add both the 9th and the 10th days in a row that we have been above average for the month of January. But speaking of your averages, all those numbers I was just telling you about, I found this handy dandy graphic this week that can kind of paint the whole picture for the story of January. What we typically see is just not too much change in your average high temperature and your average low temperature. You'll see we started out on January 1st with an average high of 59 and an average low of 36 degrees. But we do see these averages bottom out, meaning that these numbers are going to get the lowest that they will get throughout the entire calendar year at the first month of the year, which makes sense because this is typically one of our coldest months of the year in January in the thick of winter. In fact, as we progress into the end of January, your average high temperature goes up back above the 60-degree mark and your average low temperature up just 1 degree to 37 degrees. Not too much change, but we are starting to move in the other direction. Your average high and your average lows will begin to get a little bit warmer and a little bit warmer over the course of a couple of days and eventually a couple of weeks. On average, we already talked about that rainfall for the month of January, just over 4 inches of rain. But how about snow? And on average, we actually receive about 0.2 of an inch of snow in the month of January. And most months are probably not even going to have that much, but most of our snow all time, at least here in central Georgia, has come in the month of January, and that's still not too much on average. We see maybe about 1/4 of an inch of snow. But if we flash back to the beginning of last year, January 2025, you may remember that we had a whole bunch of snow at the very end of the month. But in fact, it still didn't total the snowiest day that we did have in the month of January all time. That actually goes back to 1955, where we got almost 4 inches of snow. And that's getting into about 1 inch more than we recorded at Middle Georgia Regional Airport, of course, with last year's snow event. And we did have more snow well down to the south. So if we were doing this almanac data for, say, areas like Cordele, then I do imagine the snowiest January that we ever had down there was probably last year, where they got some totals up to 9 inches. Still very hard to wrap my head around that, even after covering it just about a year ago in time. Warmest day we've ever seen in the month of January all time up here in the Macon area, 84 degrees. So yes, it has been a warm stretch and our numbers are a little bit too close to this record number for my liking, but we still haven't gone above that 80-degree mark. However, maybe Friday afternoon has the potential to. We'll talk about that in just a moment as well. Coldest temperature we've ever seen in January all time, -6 degrees. So it could always be a whole lot worse. I know these temperatures definitely not feeling like January, definitely not feeling like winter, but we could be on the other end of that range, and we could be talking about some temperatures that maybe don't even get above freezing temperature in the afternoons. Of course, that coldest temperature was a morning low value, but seeing a negative in front of a temperature value in central Georgia just does not seem right whatsoever. And then we can go to the wettest January of all time. We talked about that very briefly, 13.22 inches of rain back in 1925. So in terms of your sunrise and sunset times, that's something I like to talk about a lot too, to tell you that the days are now officially getting longer in terms of hours of daylight after we passed that winter solstice just a couple of days before Christmas last year. So 7:37 a.m., that was the sunrise time on January 1st, and kind of getting into that window of where we do have the latest sunrise during our standard time window. And then 5:39 p.m., that was our sunset on the first day of the new year. Well, as we progress into the end of the month, sunset actually going to be a little bit later, past the 6 p.m. hour once again. 6:06 p.m. is when the sun will set on January 31st, and then 7:30 a.m. is going to be when the sun begins to rise. Not too much difference between your sunrise time from the first to the end of the month. However, over the course of January, we will be gaining an extra half hour of daylight, 34 minutes of daylight to be exact. And I do imagine that increase in daylight is going to be a little bit greater as we go into the month of February. So let's go ahead and talk about what's in store over the course of this weekend, and we'll kick it off starting with your surface map. This is what I just wanted to show you to indicate that a cold front is driving our active weather that we are going to see across the southeast United States. It's obviously already quite an active picture in areas like Mississippi, Alabama, up into Tennessee, maybe even portions of northwest Georgia. Well, a frontal boundary is driving most of these rain chances, but it has kind of slowed down in motion. So there is a good amount of separation between the actual front and the rain chances that are out ahead of it. It will eventually slowly kick back into gear, but not going to be a very clean and swift, smooth motion through the southeast. It is going to have periods where it does kind of stall out and slow down, just takes a little bit of a break, but then it kicks back into gear after it gets maybe a little bit of a hydration break, like running a marathon, if you will. So here's a look at future view through the rest of your Friday afternoon into the evening hours. Mostly cloudy skies to maybe some partly cloudy skies, very similar to what we've seen just each and every afternoon. After the fog gets out of here around lunchtime, we will eventually get some peaks of sunshine, and we are going to have some well above average numbers as we go into that peak heating window around 3 to 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Progressing through the evening, and into the nighttime hours. If you have any dinner plans, any Friday evening plans, you're looking good to go. The rain's still going to be well off to the north and the northwest of us, but as we go into the nighttime frame, I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility that some of these showers that you do see up here near the metro Atlanta area could sag down a little bit farther to the southeast. So I think our northwesternmost counties maybe have a slim rain chance, a slim chance of some showers during the nighttime hours tonight. However, we are looking at that rain to still kind of push back up to the north and the northwest. It is continuous round after continuous round of shower and storm up to the north and the northwest of us. That's obviously, or would be having some implications for the Peach Bowl in Atlanta on Friday night, but very thankfully, they're playing in the Bend, so they won't have rain as a factor whatsoever for that game between Indiana and Oregon. But let's go to Saturday morning now. You can see your fair share of showers, even some storms. Some of these dark red colors enveloped within this line beginning to push through already in the morning hours. It looks like that rain finally starts to make its entrance into central Georgia. That frontal boundary way behind all of this rain finally kicks back into gear and nudges it down into our north and northwesternmost counties. I think as early as around 10 a.m. tomorrow. As we get into the afternoon hours, sometime around lunchtime, I think the rain begins to be a bit more widespread, mainly in the form of widely scattered showers, but also going to hear a couple rumbles of thunder, and we'll talk about the potential for maybe some stronger to maybe even possibly a severe storm throughout the day as well. But pay attention to the timing. It's right there in the afternoon window. We actually do get some clearing in the clouds a little bit ahead of this line of rain that does begin to move in. Still continuing to be pretty widespread, probably creeping down into areas like Macon, Warner Robins, going down I-16, the I-16 corridor as we go farther into the afternoon, and right there around dinner time, getting into the evening hours, making its push over farther to the south and the southeast. Areas like Dublin, going down to Eastman, maybe even as far over as Soperton, right there around the 6 p.m. hour. But notice the change in the colors that you are seeing. A lot of these colors have been yellow, orange, maybe even some pockets of some darker red. Well, it looks like they are transitioning more into a green shade, which is going to indicate that your rainfall rates are getting a lot lighter. And by the time we roll into the nighttime hours on Saturday, it's just a couple of scattered sprinkles, a couple of scattered light showers that are still in the picture, and then we will clear out. And eventually this cloud cover will get out of the forecast as we go throughout the day on Sunday. The front continues to move through, cooler and drier air filters in behind it, and some breezy conditions. So already going to be a bit of a breezy start to your Sunday morning. Whatever we have in the way of cloud cover does clear out by the time we go into the afternoon, which also is going to be very breezy. Take a look at how yellow and how long these wind arrows are. It is going to be a pretty breezy afternoon and a bit of a bad hair day if you have any plans later in the day on Sunday. But I do anticipate Sunday to be the best day for some outdoor plans, even despite the windy conditions. And we will have some cooler temperatures, so it will feel more seasonably appropriate. You may have to wear some layers for any afternoon plans on Sunday, but in terms of dodging the rain, I think Sunday is a much better bet for some weekend plans as opposed to what we have Saturday. But I did mention we talk about maybe the strong to severe weather potential. We have a level 1 out of 5 risk for most of our northwestern half here in central Georgia for maybe seeing a strong storm or two, maybe even a storm or two that pops up a severe warning tag. So what this means is it's an isolated risk. If you are to get a severe warning throughout tomorrow, it is only going to be a select few areas. This is not going to be widespread whatsoever, and I have not too much confidence that that severe weather risk is really going to exist outside of this outlined area, because by the time the front progresses that far to the southeast, temperatures will be cooling, the sunshine goes away. So it's really those areas where we first see the rain entering sometime around lunchtime and going throughout the early portion of the afternoon that have that window for some potential strong or severe weather. But like I said, an isolated risk, meaning not everyone is going to see something in the way of a stronger thunderstorm or even a severe thunderstorm. We're not guaranteeing that by any means, but we will keep you posted. If something is to pop up, I think it's only going to be a select few towns, select few areas of a county. You very well may luck out and just have your fair share of some steady showers that move through. But overall, in terms of your impacts, a lot of them are looking a whole lot more intense over to the west and up to the northwest. we've already seen it come to fruition with a couple of tornado warnings early in the morning down in southern Mississippi, and that actually lines up with an area we don't see shaded too often on the excessive rainfall outlook, a moderate risk, which same scale as your SPC outlook, that 1 to 5 risk that we normally look at, except the excessive rainfall outlook has a 1 through 4 category. Moderate, that red color, is going to be a 3 out of 4. So numerous flash floods are looking likely, not possible. A little bit of a stronger wording right there just south of Jackson, Mississippi, but areas in the yellow, a bit of a lesser chance of seeing some flooding risks, some scattered flash flooding as opposed to 1 or 2 isolated flash flooding instances that you could see in the marginal risk, which is the light green shade. We'll take a look at that. That marginal risk does clip areas of northwest central Georgia. What we'd really be looking at is maybe some nuisance flooding, just the ponding of some water in some areas that don't necessarily drain too well, or maybe some of those just lower lying areas near some bodies of water. I'm not expecting any impacts from a flash flood whatsoever, just maybe a couple of puddles that want to stand on the ground a little bit longer, because areas farther up to the north and the northwest are going to continue to get more rain than areas down to the south and the southeast. You can see that your rain totals do definitely taper off as you go farther over to the east and the southeast, and even areas in our far northwestern corridor, Upson County, Monroe County, Lamar County, only seeing some totals still below 1 inch in nature. But of course, as you kind of transition from this blue color into the green shade, that's obviously going to indicate lighter rain over to the east and the southeast. And we're not seeing any areas of, say, some of these darker red colors or maybe more of a burgundy up here around 3 to 5 inches of rain, which could be possible over into eastern Alabama, northwest Georgia, maybe even close to the metro Atlanta area, but that not going to be possible down here. I think we have the potential for some areas up to the north and the northwest to have some totals in some isolated spots up to around 1 inch of rain, but more than that, I don't really see in the cards for the foreseeable future. But it is worth noting that we do have rivers that flow through central Georgia. We have the Flint, we have the Ocmulgee, we have the Oconee. Well, whatever rain does fall up in those rivers farther up to the north, that water's got to go somewhere. So eventually it will make its way downstream. We'll keep our eyes peeled for anything in the way of maybe some of those river levels being high as we go into the beginning of next week, but it doesn't look like that's going to be too much of a case either. Directly to the north of us, still looking like very similar rainfall totals as opposed to what we do have here in central Georgia. Maybe some areas of the Flint River, maybe even the Chattahoochee going to have more of a risk of some of those aerial flood warnings, just indicating that the river levels are going to be above average. But now in terms of the winds, like I said, we're going to break this down piece by piece, every aspect of every day that you need to know. Throughout Friday evening, you may notice a little bit of a breeze on occasion, but overall, I think Saturday and Sunday are going to be fairly windy days. Already starting to see some shades of yellow and some red pop up as soon as Saturday morning, indicating the potential for maybe some gusts close to 20 or even 25 to 30 miles per hour throughout the day. I think if you see any gusts above 30 miles per hour, that's really going to be isolated more so in a core of a heavy rainfall or maybe something of a low-end thunderstorm. That's where you could have the winds get a bit gusty and have things get a bit messier in nature as you look outside. But the winds don't stop there after the rain gets out of here on Saturday. They will continue into the end of your weekend on Sunday. The backside of this frontal boundary will already have breezy and gusty conditions settling in for Sunday morning. Gusts possible up to 22 miles per hour. And then we start to see this flash of red, maybe even some isolated areas of pink, indicating some gusts up to 30, maybe 35 miles per hour throughout Sunday afternoon. Like I said, it is going to be breezy and it will be paired up with some cooler temperatures. So it's going to be a forecast that warrants some form of layering for any outdoor plans on Sunday. Not saying that it won't be a tad bit chilly. However, it is still going to be a much more conducive forecast than the messy environment that Saturday afternoon and evening is going to bring. And hopefully by the time we roll into Monday, we can get the breeze out of here because the temperatures are going to drop down very low as we go into Monday morning. We'll talk more about that after we cover everything with your immediate forecast this weekend. And in terms of the moisture levels, that's been part of the reason why we have a whole lot of fog in the picture each and every morning. And that's also been why we've kind of kept a 10% cover the bases chance of a sprinkle each and every day in your forecast as well, because these aren't typical dew point temperatures you see in the month of January. these are going to be more indicative of some typical dew point temperatures in January. We are going to push whatever moisture that we have in the forecast out of here, down to the south and the southeast. As soon as Sunday morning, already seeing your dew point temperatures, not your actual temperatures, but we're starting to see the landscape of the earth again, indicating very dry air, not getting into that noticeable humidity whatsoever. And then throughout the day, those numbers just continue to go down. How about some dew point temperatures in the teens as we go into Monday? That's more reminiscent of a winter forecast if I've ever seen one. But in terms of the fog, I think we're going to have one more pesky morning with some of this fog, and probably one more morning on Saturday where we are going to have a dense fog advisory. I believe this might make a streak of 6, maybe even 7 days in a row here in central Georgia that we've had a dense fog advisory in place. So if you have plans to head out the door pretty early throughout your Saturday morning, this is what you are going to have to deal with. Patchy dense fog, widespread thin fog in nature all across the area. But as we go throughout the day, you will see this is a visibility map. So I labeled it future view fog, but this is talking about your visibility. So even as we go into the afternoon, these aren't necessarily foggy skies. These are just areas where the rain is falling, maybe at some heavy rates to where it really is limiting your visibility throughout the afternoon. Saturday, all in all, is just not looking like a good day to really do much of anything outdoors. I would recommend maybe just having a bit of a movie marathon or doing something inside. But then as you go into Sunday morning, 7 a.m., crystal clear skies for a change. We finally do put an end to the streak of foggy mornings, but it is going to take a little bit more time. Not going to be Saturday morning. It is going to be on Sunday morning to wrap up the weekend, and then we will continue the crystal clear starts to the mornings as we go into the beginning of next week. So everything I just told you summed up in one graphic. 79 degrees for a high temperature on Friday. Remember that number. We'll talk about it in just a moment. But the only rain chance that we do have on Friday is going to be a 20% chance. That is for our northwesternmost counties. That may not even come to fruition, but if you live down in Dodge County, Telfair County, Wheeler County, you don't have a rain chance throughout Friday. That is just covering the bases for some areas that try to see some of the rain get going a little bit earlier ahead of this cold front moving in. I have an 80% chance of seeing a scattered shower or a storm throughout Saturday. Again, those rain chances really taper off farther down to the southeast, so not entirely confident that everyone will receive something in the form of rain, and not confident that everyone will see anything in the way of a thunderstorm, but want to cover those bases. And once again, we still have the potential for 1 or 2 of those thunderstorms being on the stronger to possibly even severe side. But 76, kind of a middle ground high temperature. The farther up to the northwest that you live, you're going to see cloud cover and rain a little bit earlier, so your temperatures won't get into the mid 70s, but farther down to the southeast, where you get more peaks of sunshine and you can warm up into the afternoon, you could even see some numbers slightly above that. So I would expect a similarly warm afternoon Saturday as to what you will have throughout your Friday afternoon if you live down to the south and the southeast, but kind of went with more of a middle ground high temperature. Then say goodbye to the 70s for a good amount of time. 41 degrees for a morning low temperature on Sunday, already starting to feel the impacts of that cooler and drier air. 56 for a high temperature throughout Sunday afternoon, and that's paired up with some breezy conditions. So it may just make it feel a little bit chilly at times, something that you will want the windbreaker for, or maybe some form of light layering throughout the day on Sunday. But speaking of your record high temperature, 79. That's actually where the record does exist back in 1949, and you will notice the record for Saturday also set back in 1949, where it went up from 79 degrees to 81 degrees. I don't anticipate us to break the record, especially up here in Macon, as of tomorrow afternoon on Saturday, but I do think that we have the potential to maybe match that record for the second time in a matter of a 3-day span on Friday afternoon. And the farther south that you live, I do anticipate some 80s on the temperature map later on Friday afternoon. But in terms of your grill cast, now let's get into some of your fun graphics. Saturday is going to be the day that you will not want to fire up the grill. That's looking like a good DoorDash night. Friday and Sunday, I still think you're looking good, but have a little bit of caution farther up to the northwest. You live in Monroe County, you live in Upson County, you live in Lamar County. That is going to be a forecast with a yellow spatula. Just play it by ear in case some of those showers do try to get going a little bit earlier into the nighttime hours on Friday. Saturday, definitely not the night to go outside. And obviously, as we go into Sunday, we will have some windy conditions, but I still think you're looking good to go as far as your grill cast. So you're going to need to utilize the whole closet this weekend. Friday, I think you can get away with some sunglasses and a short sleeve t-shirt. Saturday, don't go anywhere if you are venturing outside without that rain jacket or without that umbrella. And then Sunday, you're going to want to bundle up a bit. Maybe not necessarily scarf weather until we get into the evening hours, but I do anticipate you will need some form of a windbreaker. And you're probably going to need the sunglasses because it's going to be a bright and sunny day. Probably one of the brightest days that we have seen throughout the work week so far. But now we'll go into your extended forecast, talk about what's going to be ahead for the work week next week. 5 p.m. on Monday, that drier air is still making its impact known all the way through Tuesday next week. So we are going to see some cooler temperatures along with this very dry forecast as we settle into the beginning of the new work week next week. But then things, at least here in the southeast corner of the United States, start to get a bit more active in nature. Plenty of rain off the Atlantic coast and down in Florida. Looks like we do have maybe indications of another frontal boundary trying to move through later on Wednesday and maybe sometime as we go into Thursday, where we see a couple of spotty showers courtesy of this frontal boundary. But I just don't think we're going to have a lot of moisture to work with because this one coming in over the course of this weekend is going to keep the dry air in the forecast. Less moisture to work with means the lesser your rain chances will be. But I do have a couple of light rain chances around Wednesday and Thursday, about a 20% chance as of right now. But I do believe that as we go throughout the day on Thursday and transition into the beginning of next weekend, we are going to have a pretty dry forecast. And along with that, we are looking at maybe a reinforcing push of some cooler air. So while our temperatures will try to rebound as we go throughout the work week next week, we are going to get another reinforcing push to drop them back down. So here's your morning lows by the time you roll into Monday and Tuesday morning. Been a while since we've talked about the 20s. So upper 20s for Monday and Tuesday, starting to get a little bit warmer on Wednesday morning. And then we drop the numbers back down just a little bit as we go into Thursday. And I do anticipate Friday morning is probably going to be another morning where we do have our fair share of some upper 20s to welcome us out the door. Afternoon high temperatures do a very similar thing. Low 50s into the upper 50s throughout Tuesday and Wednesday, and then we drop them back down into the lower 50s as that next frontal boundary comes through between Wednesday and Thursday. And then we will settle into a weekend forecast that is looking like it is going to be below average or maybe near normal. Here's a look at your temperature outlook for January 16th through the 22nd. Looks like the slight probability of some below normal temperatures in north and northwestern Georgia. Down here back at home, looking like our temperatures are going to hover near average for that extended forecast that is past your 7 days. So reminder, your average high, your average low, going to be around 60 degrees for your average high. Your average low going to sit somewhere around 36 to 37 degrees. So chilly starts to the morning, but then as you go into the afternoon, feeling slightly warm, but still around 60 degrees, probably going to feel pretty chilly, especially relative to how warm the numbers have been as of lately. And for that same window, January 16th all the way through the 22nd, we have a slight chance being above normal in terms of our rainfall, which is never a bad thing. We always like to see this green shade whatsoever, especially with the lingering drought conditions that we continue to have. So we'll take every little bit of rain that we can get, but this isn't indicating anything in the way of heavy rain necessarily whatsoever. If we were to have a big weather maker like they're having right now over in Mississippi and Alabama, I imagine our green shade would be a little bit darker if we were seeing signs of that on the horizon. But this is just a general outlook. So it does look like we'll have our fair share of occasional rainmakers in your extended forecast, and we are going to get the numbers back down to more appropriate feeling for the month of January. And looking ahead, we do have our next 3-day weekend coming up very shortly. So you get through the work week next week, then you will be rewarded with your first 3-day weekend of the new year. MLK Day, 10 days away, so that's going to be on a Monday, and that also coincides with when the college football national championship is going to be. We already know one of the teams playing in Miami, and we're going to watch closely in Atlanta to see who is matching up with them, Oregon or Indiana. Then the Super Bowl. That's the NFL's national championship right there. 30 days until we kick that off. That is going to be on February 8th, I do believe, and that's going to be on NBC this year. I believe next year we finally circle back to having it on 13 WMAZ and on CBS. 6 days after the Super Bowl, fellas, don't forget Valentine's Day coming up very shortly after the Super Bowl, so you're going to have to turn your focus very quickly. But this is your reminder. You're just over a month away. Go ahead and make plans for that special someone in your life. And then 2 days later, you will have a 3-day weekend attached to Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day on a Saturday, President's Day going to be that following Monday. So a lot of people will have work and school off. So it will be a nice weekend to maybe have a weekend getaway with that special someone. But a lot of things to look forward to. Still a good, decent way away. Most of these events are taking place in February, but MLK Day will be in just over a week, in 10 days. So that'll do it for your extended forecast. Remember, stay weather aware for anything that may pop up over the course of this weekend. Other than that, going to be a messy Saturday. Nothing that we can't get through because it's going to lead into an immaculate Sunday. Just going to be breezy, a little bit cooler, but finally plenty of sunshine and finally feeling more like winter. That's the weather that settles in for the beginning of next week. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you Monday at 11 a.m. here on 13 WMAZ+.